Welcome to the Liberated Feminine Podcast. I'm Lucy Lampy, your host, and in today's episode, we're exploring integrating our sexuality without spiritually bypassing it. And what I mean by that is skipping over the human aspect of your sexuality to spiritualize it and to make it like, yes, it is sacred and sexual and all these things. It's both and. It's not either or. And what I see a lot in the space of, conscious relationship and divine union and healing and divine feminine and sacred sexuality is that there is a tendency, and I so get it, there is a tendency to, I'm just going to call it hyper-spiritualize the very human aspects of our human experience without honoring and going deeper into the very human aspect, the ego aspect. Because the truth is, yes, we are a soul and also we have an ego, and they are meant to work together. Things get sticky when we operate from our ego from a place of a lack of integration and understanding of how ego is meant to serve our soul's purpose. Your ego is what makes you you. It's your personality. It's your unique imprint. So we don't want to ever make that the villain. When you hear me specifically, when I talk about operating from a sense of ego versus a sense of soul, what I'm speaking to is when we are driven by the fear of our ego and when we are being inspired or compelled by the love that our soul always remembers. So this is something you may hear me speak on a lot, and I want to bring it back to that before I go deeper into the sexual aspect, because truly that sets the foundation, right? We have this primal, lustful urge aspect to our sexuality. And what happens when we try to bypass that and say, well, that's inferior, that's just fleshly, that's ego, and the spiritual side of this is superior and it's better and it's more enlightened than what's actually happening. This is a tricky thing about our egos, right? Is your ego is talking yourself into, oh, now you're better. So you see how this is like a sneaky little trap that we fall into. And when it comes to our sexuality too, until we do descend into these deeper layers of the sexual shadow work and exploring those desires, which I'll get into in a little bit, you can't really ascend into the, let's call it the divine aspects of sacred sexuality, because those distortions, those fundamental subconscious beliefs about your sexuality, your desires, your kinks, your urges, etc., are still unconsciously driving and shaping how you perceive your sexuality. And I think that a lot of the hesitance or resistance to doing this deeper work within our sexuality is this fear of being consumed by it. And this is the same with any kind of shadow work. When you look at a part of yourself that is darker, that has potential for harming others, harming self, there can be this fear of, oh no, I can't look at that. I can't be with that, because what if it consumes me? What if it's too seductive? What if it's too tempting? And then I fall prey to that. And nope, I can't even look at that. And so a lot of the puritanical mindsets that we have grown up with culturally, and I know that for me as an evangelical Christian pastor's daughter, there was a lot of that was hands off. It was off limits. Because if you go there, then, the devil's going to seduce you into this dark path of hedonism and all kinds of unspeakable, horrible sexual sins. the irony in that too is that the more that we repress these parts of us, the more distorted that energy is, the more we actually attract that kind of experience and those kinds of energies into our life. And then that further perpetuates the beliefs that, oh, this is unsafe to explore, this is bad, this is evil. And one of the ways that we begin to unpack this is through sexual shadow work. So what is that? Many of you are probably familiar with what shadow work is. So it's that, but specifically relating to your sexuality and the sexual aspects of you. Now, we know that the shadow is simply these parts of you that are unexplored. The parts that are, in the murky shadows. It's like, oh, what is that? My selfishness. Ooh, that doesn't, I don't know about that. My lust. Ooh, my desire to be absolutely worshipped and to dominate. Ooh, masochism, sadism, all these things that exist in our sexual shadow. And one of the most powerful and impactful ways to get into this deeper work with yourself is to explore your desires. Literally, what turns you on? Is there a fantasy or a kink or something that maybe you are really avoiding looking at, and maybe it's so deeply hidden that you've hidden it from yourself? Now, I'll relay a personal story. I still laugh at this. It's I can see the fantasy in my mind, and now it makes me laugh. It used to really turn me on. Okay, so many years ago now, I was taking a walk with my husband at the time, and he asked me, what's one of your fantasies? And mind you, this was maybe 8 years into marriage, and we had never talked about this. Never talked about it. And I was like, I don't really have any fantasies. No, I don't have any fantasies. I told you, what turns me on, and you do the things that turn me on. All those, that kind of awkward moment. And then I really got honest with myself, and I opened up and I said, you know what? There is this one fantasy that I have, and you're probably going to think I'm totally weird for this, but here goes. And I said, I have a fantasy that I'm Snow White, and then these 7 dwarves are just these 7 men who are around me, available, accessible, willing to do whatever I want them to do. They will and be happy to do it. But in a cartoon form, because the safest way that my brain would allow me to even acknowledge this fantasy of being catered to by not just one man, but 7 was in a cartoon form. And so I had this fantasy that sometimes I would drop into, during sex or during the very rare times at that time that I would masturbate. And it was in cartoon form. Because my brain that's the safest way that I could process that fantasy. Now, the thing about fantasies is sometimes as we speak them, and if there's shame around it, when there's a safe space, a container, a conversation, a friendship, a partnership, an event where you can disclose such things as fantasies and kinks and what arouses you that you feel shame around, what tends to happen is the shame begins to dissolve. And then you can, one of 2 things, actually. Number 1, you can go deeper into what is the desire, the deeper heart desire beneath that sexual desire. And number 2, you can see, is this actually something that I want, or did it just seem hot as long as there was shame around it, because that taboo aspect of it is what was feeding the arousal and the desire, the physical response. And what I have seen in my own journey, too, of unpacking the different things around my sexuality throughout the years, is that sometimes there are fantasies or kinks that once explored in a safe, consensual space, they lost their edge. And there was a little bit of a grieving process with that too, of like, I can't get off on that thing anymore because it's just like the shame isn't there anymore. And who am I without the shame? What is my desire? What is my sexual turn on without my shame? And that can be, that can throw you for a little bit of a loop. And then you get to process that and integrate that and bring this part of you home. Now, the deeper desires beneath the sexual desires, let's explore that. In the example of that fantasy, for me, the one where I would be catered to by a whole group of men, the deeper heart desire for me that I uncovered was that I wanted to be and feel so fully supported and beyond catered to. I wanted to feel seen. I wanted to feel known. I wanted to feel like my needs mattered. I wanted to feel like I could just ask for more, and I didn't have to feel guilty, and I didn't have to, earn it or prove my worth to receive. So that deeper desire that I wanted in my life, not just in the bedroom, was excavated through going deeper into my desire in that fantasy. Now, there are other things that I uncovered later on. Like, for example, I had a fantasy of just receiving a whole bunch of cum, okay? Like being a cum receptacle. Some people would call it cum dumpster. I mean, that didn't quite resonate with me, but just receiving so much life force. And even though I never felt the desire to actually act that out in real life, there was something about that turned me on. There was something about that aroused me. It did something for me. And excavating deeper, looking deeper into that, I discovered that my desire, my heart desire, my life desire was to be in such openness and receptivity to life force flowing through me that is literally endless. It just keeps coming, keeps coming and coming. And there's always another, there's always more, there's always more, there's always an untapped source. So whereas in the fantasy, the untapped source meant multiple men, like an endless line of men that, in that fantasy, in my life, what I was really, resistant to acknowledging and receiving in my life was this flow of continuous inspiration, life force, love, and tapping into that. Now, if I had bypassed the things that turned me on in different stages throughout my journey, the kinks that appealed to me, the fantasies that pushed me over the edge and, got me to climax. If I had ignored those and just said, well, that's not very spiritual, I wouldn't have excavated these deeper gifts. On the other hand, too, here's the other part. If I had judged them as, oh my God, what's wrong with me? This is so fucked up. What does this mean for my relationship? What does this mean for, am I bad? Am I unfaithful? What's wrong with me? If I had gone there and followed that train of thought, then the shame would have blocked me. It would have blocked my heart from receiving the bigger, juicier thing that I really wanted to tap into. So the name of the game with so much of this in integrating our sexuality is dissolving the shame. When you remove the shame from the concoction, everything shifts. Then you can see more clearly, okay, is this something I actually want to explore with my partner or in my life? Or is this something that was just appealing because it felt like something I shouldn't do? Because it's in our human nature, y'all, to feel drawn or feel that sense of rebellion to do the things that we have been told we shouldn't do. And another piece of this is, going deeper with, let's say, your inner teenager, that whatever versions of you that have needed to rebel, that have felt the need to, reclaim their power or define their voice by pushing against what they've been told is appropriate. And I find that a lot of this work with working with our sexuality is very intimately tied, actually, and maybe this might not surprise you, but for some of you it might. It's very intimately tied to this inner child work and to our inner teen work, our inner adolescent work. Because in those formative years, we do have these beliefs shaped about our bodies, about our sexuality, about our pleasure, about, you can't touch yourself. Like, oh, that's disgusting. What's wrong with you? One of my first memories, I must have been maybe 4 years old. And one of my first memories was I was exploring my body. I was just kind of, doing my thing. I was, bored and thought, oh, this feels kind of good. And my father saw me and he was like, what are you doing? That's disgusting. Like, doesn't it smell bad? And I felt so disgusted and ashamed. And I remember just feeling of just wanting to disappear into a little crack. And yeah, just the weight of the shame and like, oh my God, is there something wrong with me? And that shaped so much of how I experienced my body and my pleasure and my sexuality growing up, and the ways that it showed up in a more distorted form of seeking that out with making out with guys in secret. That was kind of my thing. That was like my, that was as far as my rebellion went, which is funny because it felt so like, oh my God, I'm being so bad. But I really got off on that. It's like, I'm doing something that I'm, that it's not okay for me to do, something that, my Bible says is not okay, something that my parents say is not okay, and I'm getting away with it. And if we allow these things to go, unexplored throughout our lives, hey, guess what eventually happens? Things like affairs, infidelity, building emotional or sexual or all of the above bonds with people because we feel too bored in our relationships, So these things run deep. And the sexual shadow work, when we really want to access the incredible consciousness expanding aspects of our sexuality with our partner, and we're going through a spiritual awakening and we're like, I'm a full spectrum liberated woman, that sexual shadow work, you cannot skip it. You cannot escape it. And this is why it is so powerful to have space to unpack these layers within a safe space. That could be a space by yourself where you're just getting really brutally honest with yourself about your turn-ons and your desires and the things that you feel ashamed of in your sexuality, and or doing that with your partner, even more vulnerable. Because there probably will be moments where you hear something that your partner has to say or vice versa, and the other responds with ooh, that's hard to hear. Like, that's out there. Okay, I need a moment to process that. I've been there. Now it's like very little can faze me because not only have I gone so deep into my own things around sexuality, but I've also been working with people for years now on this. And so when I hear people's kinks and fantasies and what turns them on, it's like, okay, all right. Like, there is a something for everybody. And so the key thing here is to allow it space and to not shame it or make yourself bad for it. But always remember that you also have the sovereignty of choice, and you are not a slave to your desires, because that's not liberation. But what is liberation, especially when it comes to your sexuality, is being able to say, you know what? Yeah, this is fucking hot to me. This turns me on. And it doesn't own me, and it's not my only path to pleasure, and it's not something that I have to habitually come back to be able to have an orgasm. So this is another point that I like to really emphasize for women when they ask about fantasizing and things in their self-pleasure practice, that if your vision for yourself is to be liberated in your sexuality, then part of that is not being limited to one single path of pleasure, one single path to orgasm, one single path to turn on, but just loosening your grip, right, on that one thing and seeing what else is there. What else is there? What else is coming alive in my body? Maybe exploring different energies that you can tap into in a self-pleasure practice and see how that resonates. One of my favorites I remember tapping into in my self-pleasure practice in that first year was this kind of commanding, but loving, but so direct, dark masculine presence. And just being commanded by that on how to touch myself, on what to do, how fast, slow down, don't stop, keep going, things like that, and tapping into that energy. And this was outside of partnered sex, so there's so much that you can explore within that, and then just see what shadows does that bring up. Does it bring up a resistance to liking that? Is there an edge there that I can explore? And so these are the things that you can continually explore. It's not a one-time thing. It's not a one-season thing, but just having the intention of continually exploring your sexual shadow without automatically jumping to spiritualizing it, so that you can still enjoy the aspects of being human. You can have, I'm telling you from personal experience, okay? You can have both the primal, lustful, just like grab me like you own me, and move me how you want to. Take what you want, and at the same time have this deep soul connection and this reverence and this integral trust and respect. And in that, feeling this presence of like massive beams of light and consciousness connecting from his cock into your pussy, you can have both. It's not like sex just needs to be this enlightened experience where you're praying to God. You can touch God through some doggy style fucking. Yes, it's possible. You can do both. This is part of the paradox of being human and being divine. So I'm going to leave that right there and let that soak in. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what's resonating with you. If you can email me at support@thewildawakening.com. And in the meantime, thank you for tuning into this episode. And here's to liberating your wild feminine heart.
Bring the boom, I bring the bass, give me a taste, they me the waste. I'm your little plaything. I got to feel